Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We really appreciate you tuning in. Before we meet today's guest, we do want to give a shout out to our partners, Vital Signs Wall of Fame, the Global Community of Women in High School Sports, We Coach, and the Florida Coaches Coalition. You've heard me say many times, these are four great organizations. You should really add them to your network. And now, please don't hit that fast forward button. I'm watching you. Stay with us for the next 3 minutes. We want to give a shout out to our sponsors. These are companies that I used as an athletic director. I think you should be using them too. Here we go. We want to thank Gipper for their support of the podcast. Gipper is the exclusive and official high school social media graphics solution for us. And if you go to Gipper.com, their team is going to show you how to create world-class content for your school's social media channel. Your students are on social media, and if you're not, you're really missing out on a great opportunity to promote your teams and celebrate your athletes. Go to Gipper.com, mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. That's Gipper.com. We also want to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Go to their website, check out their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's a great way to showcase your school record boards, your school's Hall of Fame, or simply showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com, mention the podcast, they'll give you a nice discount too. Vital Signs Wall of Fame. We'd like to thank Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more. Hometown Ticketing is digital ticketing that offers more support, more security, more customization. Hometown Ticketing is here to help you make the best solution in online ticketing. HometownTicketing.com. We'd also like to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Schedule a live web demo, see their scoreboards and their score tables in action. Their products not only generate income for your department, they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. That's sidelineinteractive.com. Check them out today. We'd like to thank Huddle for their support. Go to huddle.com, change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school, and our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided that allowed them to coach our kids up to their highest level. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to thank Snap Raise. Are you tired of spending hours and days and weeks with a fundraiser that gives you little, if any, return on investment? Go to snapraise.com/EDAD. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at my school with tremendous success. It flat out works. And they even have a program where they'll give you your funding before you actually start your fundraiser. Go to snapraise.com. Check out their entire suite of platforms designed to help you do your job better. That's snapraise.com. We want to say thanks to Home Campus, the official high school and state association management platform for us. It's also your one-stop platform for things like scheduling, facility management, student-athlete eligibility and clearance, and a whole lot more. As an AD, I used Home Campus every single day, and it was just great. To get started, all you have to do is go to homecampus.com. That's homecampus.com. And we'd like to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic directors already hear back from the complainers, the people that want to gripe about everything. Athletic Surveys can connect you with that small group, but it also connects you with the 98% of your parents and student athletes that love and support your program. And that's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking with a frustrated parent or a frustrated student athlete or your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. athleticsurveys.com. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We're going to Louisiana today, and our guest is Dr. Jamira Mitchell. She's got an incredible athletic background. She is an NIL educator. She's a high school educator in the virtual setting, also hosts her very own popular podcast called the NIL Podcast, or the NIL Spot, excuse me. Dr. Mitchell, welcome to my podcast, The Educational AD.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, excited to have you on your own right. And as you know, NIL is certainly kind of taken over the discussion at both the high school and the college level these last couple of years. We're going to talk about that later. But right now, we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that quick bio, where you were born, where you grew up, maybe take us up through your own high school and college years. I'm sure those are very exciting. And then we'll take a quick break and find out more about your career. But what is the Jamira Mitchell origin story?
All right. So I am from a little town called Baldwin, Louisiana. I was born in Franklin, which is 7 miles away. But yeah, I was more of the the statistician aspect of sports. So I've never played sports, but I know everything about sports because my dad was the local sports director for our newspaper for like I think about 40 years. And so he was also an educator. So we were always on the same schedule. So we would, of course, dad would teach during the day. He'd come and pick me up, and then after that we would go and see what happened at the local high school, who was playing and all of that. So I've always been around sports, and then I decided that I kind of like this. So I decided to actually get into entertainment. I went to Dillard University and obtained my bachelor's in music business management. Well, I graduated in 2010, and in 2008, of course, was the major recession. And so at the time, I was like, okay, I'm too far into this degree. So I was like, okay, I'm going to finish this degree. Worked for a little while at a homeless shelter, well, at a battered women's shelter. And then I decided I'm going to move to New York and pursue my master's in sports business because I was still had the sports in me, and worked in sports business for a while. And then I was like, okay, I need to understand the mindset of student athletes and see why, they're having the issues that they're having, as far as the mindset of, oh, coach is going to take care of it, or this one is going to take care of it, that one is going to take care of it. So then I pivoted again and I became an educator. And so while educating, I saw that it was so unfortunate that, they still had the mindset that coach is going to take care of them. And I'm like, coach can only take care of you for so long. So I then pursued my PhD in education with a concentration in sports business management. And my dissertation was definitely, it was centered around the academic support that high school students receive from their high school counselors, only to find out that the high school counselors really didn't know how to actually counsel the student athlete, because they were only taught that you look at the student athlete as a student. So, and then during that time, I'm a career and technical education teacher. So I have the flexibility to include a lot of the fun topics as branding, such as PR. And this was well before NIL was thought of. And now that NIL came along, I was like, I think I could do this. And so that is how the NIL Spot podcast started, because as we know in business, people do business with those that they know, they like, and they trust. And so now we are building the knowing part from an educational standpoint so that they can hear about it, and then hopefully they can take some of the gems that we drop on the podcast into their everyday world.
Yeah, great stuff. And we're going to take a deeper dive into, the podcast and all things NIL later on. Let's talk more about you. You mentioned that you were not a student athlete, let's say, growing up, but you had that love of sports, you had that exposure to sports, through your father and his position. The many athletic directors, have come out of a similar background. They didn't really play on teams, but they worked as a manager, as a statistician, et cetera. They did the same thing. They volunteered with sports teams when they got to college. And the experiences that that you received and they received are again among some of the more important ones, and some of the things that just can't be taught in, say, an undergraduate or graduate program on athletic administration. And don't get me wrong, those programs are great, but it's those hands-on experiences that really raise, in our case, an athletic director's IQ. Can you look back to those days? I know you're much younger than I am. Can you look back to those days in high school and think of some situations that you were exposed to in your role in athletics that at the time might not have meant that much, but now working with student athletes and looking back, you can say, hey, that was an important moment. Anything stick out for you?
Yes, there are quite a few things that stick out to me, but having the ability to actually be on the sidelines while the coaches were coaching. So my dad, of course, he's a girl dad all around. So when when the bad language happened, because of the excitement and all of that, he's like, move out of the way, move out. And I'm like, Dad, I'm okay, I got this. when 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 we're on the sidelines and we see that the play is moving, he's like, move. I was like, Daddy, I can move too. But I will tell you that the ability to actually be able to hear my dad call out the stats, but I already had it written down. And so like now, because I know pretty much just about every game that there is, I can take that and actually help my students. And I can talk to them about football. We can talk about basketball. We can talk about baseball. And I didn't think of it at the time, but it's truly a gift that not everyone has. And I think that is how I differentiate myself, because I can talk stats with them. I'm like, and as soon as they show me a huddle, or as soon as they show me their highlight reels, I'm like, but did you see that you missed this one, but you got, and so I think that is the conversational aspect that I truly enjoy, and I'm so glad that I was able to learn it at such an early age.
Oh, no, absolutely. And again, I ask that question frequently, and I always love to hear the answers about, okay, what was meaningful back in your day? So appreciate you sharing that. That's very cool. For our listeners, our guest today is Dr. Jamira Mitchell. She's an educator. She's an NIL guru. She hosts her own podcast, and we're going to hear more, but let's take our first break. We're coming back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank Gipper for their support of the podcast. Gipper's the official social media graphics solution for us. And if you go to Gipper.com, their team is going to show you how to create world-class marketing content for your school's social media channel. Your students and your parents are online. And if you're not celebrating your athletes and promoting your teams on social media, you're missing a great opportunity. Gipper's used and trusted by over 3,000 athletic programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made simple. In fact, it's so simple, even I can use it. Go to Gipper.com. Tell them you heard about it on the podcast. They'll give you a nice discount. That's Gipper.com. We also want to say thank you to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Go to their website and check out their interactive touchscreen consoles. That's right, touchscreen. It's a great way to showcase your school record boards, maybe your school's Hall of Fame, or simply share your school's diverse history and your proudest moments. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Tell them you heard about it on the podcast. Guess what? They'll give you a nice discount too. That's vitalsignswalloffame.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Once again, our guest is Dr. Jamira Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell, you've got I don't know if I should say unique, but you have a very interesting position as an educator. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about how you kind of created that and some of the things that you do, maybe that are unique with your students?
Sure. So I currently teach at a virtual K-12 school in Louisiana, and I teach career and technical education. So a little bit about career and technical education. It's pretty much for students who have a drive to move from high school to careers, but it's also for those students who are looking to move from high school to career to four-year college universities. So within my school, which I've been there for 3 years, I was able to introduce our students to esports because, of course, being in a virtual setting, many students don't have the opportunity to have that social life. So, we worked with esports, and within esports, took some of the career and technical aspects of learning about branding, learning about shoutcasting, because a lot of our kids, they don't want to actually be the players, but they actually want to be the announcers. And we also have our kids are able to serve as managers and to be the coaches for certain teams. So we were able to take all of that and build an ecosystem. And then also, before I moved into the virtual setting, while in brick and mortar, I worked with my student athletes. I worked with my students, and we did March Madness, where they had to put together their own promotion, where they actually built their brackets and had fun with it. So I take my love for sports and kind of use it with my kids, but we work through it together. And even for the students that are not into sports, but they love the fact of promotion, they love the fact of social media. So, like, I also teach now social media. And my students are working to see how they can rebrand designs. Or I'm just going to say it, they love their Taylor Swift, so we rebranded her Instagram feed. So it's just fun. And I think that is why I love the flexibility in my classes, because I can take my love for certain topics and then find out my students' love for certain topics, and then we mesh it together. So, like, we're really on to, Travis Kelsey and Taylor Swift. So it's the best of both worlds. So I get to play football with my boys and some of my girls that like football. And then I get to play a Swifty with, my girls and some of my boys that like Taylor Swift. So it's the best of both worlds.
It sounds really, really cool. How has this program and some of the things that you have introduced to it, how has it been received, like within the school, within the community? Are you getting some good feedback on it?
Well, it's interesting. We are a work in progress. We are, building the growth mindset. There has been a lot of fixed mindset, so we're like moving into growth mindset. And it's also, a little bit a lot for our kids too, because when they think of social media, they're thinking about just scrolling. And then I teach them about the business of social media. So right now they're building their own social media agency. So we're looking at how they can go out and find a client. But before we find that client, a target audience. So we work through it, and the community, I think, is now being receptive of it.
No, well, that's good. And I love how you put it, that it is a work in progress and that, no matter how successful we are, we always want to be try to get a little bit better, very cool. Let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit. I think I want to talk about um, your podcast, and then we're going to take a break and then talk about NIL separately. And of course, they're going to be related, but why did you start a podcast? Why NIL, and how is it going?
So the why. Of course, I love sports. I love all things sports. I love all things sports and education, with emphasis on education. And so I was I had this mindset. I was like, I want everyone to know about being able to be that athlete, be that student. And it was just falling on deaf ears. It was the mind, like I said earlier, the mindset of, oh, coach is going to take care of it. And when I was in brick and mortar at the time, it was like, Ms. Mitchell, don't worry about it. Coach said he got me. And so I was like, I just don't feel like I'm getting through. So a friend said, well, since you talk so much, start a podcast. And so that is how the NIL Spot podcast began. And in my mind, the NIL Spot is a landing place, and it is a landing place for all things educational, not just for the student athlete, but also for the parent, also for the brand, and also for the coaches. So that is how the NIL Spot podcast began.
Very, very cool. Now, you and I were talking off air. What are some of the things that you talk about? Who have been some of your guests? And if one of our listeners wants to reach out and add it to their listen list, how do they find it?
So sure. Actually, recently we just released our second episode, and I'm sorry, our second season. And the first episode was with Mr. Jaden Smith, and Jaden is currently, and I'm sure if you guys have been following NIL, Jaden currently is he is a baseball player at Xavier University in New Orleans. And so you're probably thinking, where is that? What is that? Well, it is a small, historically Black college and university. It's private. And he was able to land a 5-figure deal with Mathnasium. So it was great to begin the second season with such a bang. And if you want to listen, we are on all platforms, Spotify, um, iHeartRadio, anything you can think of. Of course, the Apple and the Google Play, but it's under the NIL Spot podcast.
Very cool. And if one of our listeners wanted to reach out and add you to their network, and listeners, I think you got a pretty good resource here. How can they get a hold of you?
Sure. So I am all things Instagram. Go figure, right? So you can follow me at the NIL Spot podcast, and I'm definitely all things LinkedIn. You can follow me at Jamira Mitchell, PhD.
Okay. Well, we'll give that out again at the end of the podcast. For listeners, we're visiting with Dr. Jamira Mitchell, educator, podcast host, leader in the world of NIL. Let's take another quick break, but we are coming back with some more. So please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We'd also like to say thank you to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more, but I'm going to. Go to hometownticketing.com. Their team will show you how to set up and sell tickets for your events, not just athletic events, but things like school plays, concerts, dances, even graduation. And here's the best part. Every account gets assigned a dedicated client success manager that's going to provide you hands-on support every step of the way. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We'd also like to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and check out their products, and then schedule a live web demo and see their scoreboards and their score tables in action. Their products not only generate income for your athletic department, they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. That's sidelineinteractive.com. And we'd like to thank Huddle. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided that helped them coach our kids up to the highest level. Go to huddle.com and join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. That's huddle.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Once again, our guest is Dr. Jamira Mitchell. She's an educator. She's a podcast host, and she talks about NIL. Dr. Mitchell, NIL has been around now for a few years at the college level. It's already trickling down to the high school level. Various states have enacted policies and things like that. But what are your thoughts? You're the host of the NIL Spot podcast. What do you think about NIL?
So I am pro NIL. I have definitely been pro paying athletes for a while. And I think that if done correctly, and if made sure that every student athlete gets the opportunity to be able to be paid, I'm definitely down for. There has been a lot, and I think even when I was studying it back in 2008, 2009, with the thought of paying student athletes to play, I thought about it from the standpoint of, can every student athlete afford a pizza after the game? And so, that was the biggest thing. Like, kids were leaving it all on the field or leaving it all on the court, and yet they came home to an empty refrigerator. So I'm definitely about the whole NIL. And I'm actually for it on the high school level, but more, I think, from an educator standpoint. So I want to make sure that you understand the foundation. I want to make sure you understand the terminology when we talk about, you possibly going into a meeting and the company asking you, okay, so we give you this money. How are we going to get our ROI? Like, I want you to know that ROI is return on investment. Those are the things that I think that we should be talking about on the high school level, and maybe doing smaller, lower scale deals so that everyone can maybe get a slice of pizza. But for the fact of student athletes and having the opportunity, I'm definitely down for it. And I love the opportunity, but I really wish that we can start it on the high school level, where we are explaining and teaching more about NIL, so that when they do get into the bigger and on bigger levels, and higher levels and bigger offices, they'll be prepared.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And again, from as a fan of college sports, I have no problem patting myself on the back and saying, yes, our college student athletes in all sports, the big ones, the ones that don't get all the media attention, there should be some funding so they can get that slice of pizza. I'm sure you were the same way. I was a poor college student, okay, and I wasn't even on full scholarship.
I am a poor professional, so
Uh,
I understand.
so we should find better ways to compensate our college student athletes. I'm not, again, I'm just not a fan of the, I guess I'm too old. I'm just not a fan of the $1 million or even $1,000 deals. And maybe I'm just that cranky old guy, get off my porch. For high school, you and I talked about this off camera. For the number of high school student athletes, and I know there have been some that have had significant NIL deals, but for the overall percentage that are going to have these, I really think it's a lot of fuss by state associations and by people like me, high school athletic directors. It's just not worth it. So many of our kids, the vast majority, are never going to see this type of money. What's your rebuttal to that, or do you agree with me?
So I agree and I disagree. So I agree from the aspect of many college student athletes won't see those type of deals, but I think more of from the high school level, as I continue to say, it's more of educating. So if we can have it to where our student athletes are not finding themselves in situations where, maybe they're coming from a single parent household and they're doing illegal activity because they want to make sure that mom, the money that she's making can still keep the lights on. So they're finding themselves, unfortunately, in situations that they shouldn't be in because of where they are. So I think that it's possible, but the reality of it is it's not for everyone. So I think that's the issue that we're having, as to making sure that even if we give them a small stipend, 10, $15, but it doesn't, mean that they have to do illegal things to be able to possibly help mom in a situation that they shouldn't be in either way.
Right. No, and again, I certainly see that. And I love to hear the stories of, I think one that sticks out for me, and I can't remember what the university was. Maybe it's good that I can't remember it, but it was a young lady who was a college athlete, and she on her own, but also working with the school's NIL and compliance officers, had arranged like a dozen different NIL deals, all locally in her college town, where she was making a nice chunk of money, but it wasn't the and this was in a university town where they had a pretty well-known football team and women's basketball team, but here was this she was a swimmer, and she had created this NIL system for her. So I like to hear those stories, but hey, who cares what I think? Okay.
And me too.
Yeah. For our listeners, our guest today is Dr. Jamira Mitchell. She's an educator, she's a podcast host, and she's one of the many NIL gurus out there. We're going to take another break, but we are going to come back with some more. So please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our friends at Snap Mobile. Snap Mobile is the company. I want you to go to snapraise.com. SnapRaise is their fundraising platform. And if you're an AD, you probably spent hours and days and weeks with various fundraisers that provide little, if any, return on your investment. I'm telling you right now, you need to go to snapraise.com/EDAD. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it. And what's most important, it works. They even have a program where they will give you your funding before you actually start your fundraiser. They also have several other platforms like Snap Manage, Snap Connect, Snap Store that are all designed to help you do your job better. So go to snapraise.com. You're automatically entered into a $1,500 drawing for your next SnapRaise fundraiser. That's snapraise.com. Check it out today. We also want to say thanks to our friends at Home Campus. Home Campus is the official high school and state association management platform for us. It's also your one-stop platform for things like scheduling, facility management, student athlete eligibility and clearance forms, and a whole lot more. As an athletic director, I used Home Campus every single day, and it was just fantastic. And you're going to love it too. To get started, all you have to do is go to homecampus.com. That's homecampus.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Jamira, one of the things that we try to do with this podcast is the idea of sharing best practices. So once again, I'm going to put you on the spot. You've had a lot of different experiences within the world of athletics. You dealt with a lot of different people and organizations. What are a couple of things, or one, that you would consider a best practice that you can share with our listeners?
I think it's just simple. Treat people the way you want to be treated. There are so many moving parts that sometimes people can get lost in the shuffle, and you don't want to make a person feel as though the work that they contribute is minute, because you don't know who's doing what. And as long as you make sure that everyone on your team feels like an active team member and someone that can be a starter. I'm sorry, I'm using all of these analogies, but you want every person on the team to feel like they are a starter. And I think the other aspect is find everyone's stroke of genius. you never know who is doing what. You never know who is strong at what. So if you sit your team down and you say, I know I am not as strong in topic A, but who likes this? And then that also makes every person on the team feel like a starter. So I think treat people like you want to be treated and finding everyone's stroke of genius are those two principles that I live by.
I love that. And again, it's treating people the right way. It's what you should do, but it also pays such huge dividends, coming back to you. Um, I know I'm putting you on the spot again. Can you think of an example where that happened to you and how it made you feel as you went about the rest of your day or that week?
Oh yes, definitely. So when I was in brick and mortar, I had a my lead teacher, and she drilled me over and over again, but I loved it because every time she told me, hey, she was like, Miss Mitchell, I would suggest that you get this credential, or I would suggest that you do this or implement this into your classroom. And what she did is she didn't understand that the foundation was there, but she was just building it. And she literally has made me into the great educator that I am, the person that is not afraid to take risk, especially in education, whereas it would help my students and build them up as well. And she was like, this is what you need to do. This is how we're going to get there. And she laid out the plan, and it's been working ever since. So if I can, I will definitely shout out Dr. Wilkerson.
Well, again, I'd love to hear those stories. And hopefully that continues to happen in your life and in, your business as well. Jamira, this has been really cool spending some time with you, get to know you a little bit, but we're not done yet. We always wrap up with the athletic director's toolbox. Now, you're not an athletic director, but you certainly know your way around the world of athletics. So we're going to take our final break, hear from Athletic Surveys, who sponsor this segment. When we come back, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director, but I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. So let's take that final break. And when we return, we're going to see what Dr. Jamira Mitchell puts into her new athletic director toolbox. We want to thank Athletic Surveys for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment. Athletic directors get a lot of feedback, and a lot of times it's from the squeaky wheels, a frustrated parent or a struggling student athlete. And we need to hear back from them, but we also need to hear back from the 98% of our parents and student athletes that support our programs. And that's where Athletic Surveys comes in. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that'll let you take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. They're going to connect you with that frustrated parent or athlete, but they are also going to connect you with the 98% that support your program. And that information's particularly valuable when you're talking with that parent or that student athlete or your principal or your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. Like I said, they'll create a custom survey that'll let you connect with your parents and your student athletes. Athleticsurveys.com. Let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We've been visiting today with Dr. Jamira Mitchell. She's an educator, she's a leader, she's a podcast host. And right now, I'm going to challenge her to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job. But I'm only going to let her put 3 items in that toolbox. So, Dr. Mitchell, what 3 items are going to go into your new athletic director toolbox?
All right. So the first one is, of course, educate your student athletes. But not only educating the student athletes, but educating the parents, because sometimes you never know, but many of the student athletes may be first generation college students. So you want to make sure that you never take for granted that the student athletes and the parents know maybe basic skills or basic ideas or topics that you expect them to know, but they just may not know. So the second thing is to make sure you're always best friends with compliance. Now that we're entering into the NIL world, you want to make sure that your student athlete is eligible academically and eligible within the NIL and the deals that they are creating. And finally, you always want to make sure that you have a brand that you would like to promote. And so you should have at least three different brands within this umbrella of brands. So the first one is, of course, the brand that you have for the school. Well, the first one is, of course, your personal brand. Then you look at the brand that you have for the school, and then you look at the brand that you have for the actual athletic department. So once you put all of those brands together, and once you make sure that you educate the student athlete, and then, of course, compliance, you are set and on your way to go. Oh, and then you can also educate them using the NIL Spot podcast as well.
Oh, absolutely. You definitely want to have your podcast in there. Thanks so much for sharing. You probably saw me scribbling those down. One more time, if one of our listeners wants to reach out and connect with you, maybe add you to their network or take a listen to your podcast, how do they do that?
So the podcast, as stated before, is on any and every platform from Google to Apple to iHeartRadio, Spotify. It is listed as the NIL Spot Podcast. You can also catch us on Instagram at the NIL Spot Podcast. We are now on YouTube, the NIL Spot Podcast. And you can reach out to me personally on LinkedIn, Jamira Mitchell, PhD.
Okay. Dr. Jamira Mitchell, thanks so much for sharing with our listeners today, and all the best moving forward with, the virtual ed and with your podcast.
Thank you so much.
For listeners, we do this just about every day. And of course, we appreciate you listening. You also know that we upload our Zoom recordings to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. Come back next time for another great interview. And if you'd like to be a guest, reach out to me at jakestouchdown@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time on the Educational AD Podcast.